You probably clicked on this because you already know something is shifting in the UFC lightweight division, and you can feel it, but you can't quite name it. The title picture looks messy right now. Ilia Topuria just moved down to 155 and took the belt. Justin Gaethje holds the interim strap. Islam Makhachev is still lurking somewhere in the background, and the whole division feels like it's one result away from an absolute earthquake. But here's the thing nobody is talking about loudly enough. There is one man sitting right at the top of the contender rankings, unbeaten in every non-UFC side competition he's entered, actively calling out champions and backup fighter slots at the same time, and already laying out a plan so aggressive it almost sounds reckless. His name is Arman Tsarukyan, and if you think his story right now is just about waiting for a title shot, you are seriously underestimating what's happening. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly where Arman's head is at, what his short-term UFC strategy looks like, why his outside the Octagon side quests actually make a lot of sense, and why the lightweight division should be very, very worried. Let's be honest about something first. Being the #1 contender in the UFC is both the best and worst position to be in. On paper, you're next in line. You're at the front of the queue. You've earned it. But in reality, you are completely at the mercy of other people's decisions. If the champion gets injured, your fight gets pushed. If the matchmaker decides a different fight makes more money, you wait. If 2 title fights collapse in a row, which has happened to Arman, you're sitting there, staying in shape, staying sharp, watching the clock tick. Arman was supposed to fight Islam Makhachev for the lightweight title in January 2025. That fight fell apart. He had to pull out injured, and then the whole division reshuffled around him. That would break a lot of fighters mentally. And here's what's interesting. That exact frustration, that exact feeling of I can't just wait around is what explains everything Arman has been doing since then. Every grappling match, every wrestling side event, every call-out. It's not random. It's a guy refusing to let circumstances control his momentum. This matters because what Arman has chosen to do with that frustration is actually a masterclass in staying dangerous and staying relevant. Here's the central idea of this whole video, and I want you to lock into this. The best fighters don't just wait for their opportunity. They manufacture so much noise and momentum that the opportunity becomes impossible to ignore. That's what Arman is doing right now, and the proof is right in front of us. On March 29, 2026, Arman competed at RAF 7, a wrestling promotion that has been quietly building into one of the most interesting combat sports crossover events on the planet. His opponent was Giorgio Poulos. Their first match back in February had turned into a controversial brawl, punches thrown in what was supposed to be a wrestling match, chaos everywhere. People were talking about it for weeks. So what does Arman do? He takes the rematch, and this time he wins clean, a 9-3 decision, dominant, controlled, professional. Speaking on the Ariel Helwani show on Monday, March 31st, Arman said about the rematch, "It was so clean, he didn't even punch me once. I can fight anywhere, anytime. I'm a fighter. It's a thing that I'm living for. I wake up, I go to the gym, I fight." So, let's break down exactly what Arman's strategy looks like heading into the second half of 2026. Because when you zoom out, there are 3 clear things happening simultaneously, and together they form one of the smartest positioning moves in MMA right now. The first part of Arman's strategy is the most directly UFC related, and also the one most people are sleeping on. Arman confirmed on Monday that he has spoken with UFC brass, and he is positioning himself as the backup fighter for the headlining title fight at the UFC White House event. Now, what is the UFC White House event? This is a card being planned to take place at the White House, an unprecedented location for a UFC show, reflecting the increasingly close relationship between UFC and political events in 2026. The main event is shaping up to be 155-pound champion Ilia Topuria defending against interim champion Justin Gaethje. Arman said it himself, "I'm going to train to be in shape if something happens in the main event at White House. I'll be the backup fighter, so I'll be ready to fight there. And then they'll announce my next fight after Ilia versus Gaethje." This is a calculated move, not a desperate one. Here's why it's smart. If Topuria or Gaethje gets injured before fight night, which is always a real possibility in combat sports, Arman steps in. He fights for the title.
not as a challenger who was gifted a shot, but as a professional who stayed ready, stayed sharp, and made himself available. And if the main event goes ahead as planned, he watches the outcome, he knows who the champion is, and his title fight gets announced immediately after. Both scenarios work in his favor. Compare that to what most contenders do. They sit at home, wait for the call, occasionally post on social media, and gradually lose the edge. Arman is staying in fight shape through wrestling matches. He's staying sharp. He's staying visible. Instead of watching the division from the sidelines, he's standing at the door with his hand on the handle. That's not luck. That's preparation meeting opportunity on purpose.
Now let's talk about the side quests, because this is where Arman's story gets genuinely fascinating. Some people look at what he's doing outside the UFC and say, why risk it? Why go wrestle strangers? Why grapple random guys? You're the #1 contender, just wait. And honestly, that point of view makes sense on the surface, but it completely misunderstands who Arman is and what the combat sports landscape looks like right now. Let's look at what he's actually done outside the UFC in recent months. Earlier in 2026, Arman competed for the Hype organization in Brazil, where he choked out former UFC flyweight Muhammad Mokaev in a grappling match headliner. Then, less than a month later, he was at RAF 7, wrestling Giorgio Polañas in front of a crowd packed with MMA stars and Olympic medalists. About the RAF, Arman said, "They do such a good show. The fireworks, this, that, music. They do a very good job promoting, bringing in stars. There are legit wrestlers. Imagine 6, 7, maybe 8 medalists from the Olympic Games on one card. It's one of the best cards ever." Arman acknowledged this directly. Because of our names, it's going to be bigger as well. He gets it. He understands the ecosystem. He's not just showing up to compete, he's helping build something. And in every single one of these side matches, he has won. He is undefeated in every non-UFC competition he's entered. But here's the real reason this matters for his UFC career. When you compete consistently, even outside the UFC, you stay sharp. Your timing stays sharp. Your wrestling stays sharp. A fighter who hasn't competed in 8 months and then walks into a UFC title fight is a different animal than one who's been competing every few weeks across different formats. Muhammad Ali used to spar constantly between fights. Wrestlers drill the same takedown 10,000 times, not because they don't know how to do it, but because repetition under competitive pressure builds a kind of automatic confidence that you simply cannot fake. Every time Arman steps on the mat, whether it's in a UFC cage or a wrestling hall in front of a few thousand fans, he is reinforcing the neural patterns that make him dangerous, and the potential matchups keep getting bigger. Next on his radar, a grappling match against Dillon Danis, potentially as soon as next week under the Hype banner. On the Danis matchup, Arman had no doubts. It's not confirmed yet. We're going back and forth, negotiating. For me, it doesn't matter. I can wake up and go to wrestle Dillon Danis. He's easy money for me. He's going to get tired in 3 minutes. Now, Dillon Danis is a polarizing figure, known as much for his social media presence as his actual BJJ credentials. But here's the thing. A match with Danis would generate enormous online attention. Danis has a massive following. The matchup would trend, and Arman walks out of it with more visibility, more momentum, and, based on everything we've seen, very likely another win. And after Danis, Arman has already pointed his finger at the next target in RAF, Colby Covington. Arman called Covington a regular fighter and dismissed him as easy money. He said, "I just went there and wrestled with a bodybuilder, now I'm going to wrestle with Colby. He's not on that level even like a contender anymore. He can talk a lot." Now, whether you love or hate Colby, you have to admit that matchup would be appointment viewing. 2 guys with serious wrestling backgrounds going head-to-head in a pure wrestling context. That's actually compelling. The pattern here is clear. Arman is building a side career that runs parallel to his UFC trajectory, and every match he takes adds another chapter to the story. Now let's zoom into the actual UFC title picture, because this is ultimately where Arman's story ends, or rather, where it reaches its peak. Right now, at 155 pounds, you have Ilia Topuria, the unified lightweight champion, a terrifying striker who moved up from featherweight and immediately captured the belt. Undefeated, 22-0, young, fast, and absolutely devastating with his hands. Then, Justin Gaethje, the interim champion, a veteran, an absolute war machine, someone who has never once been in a boring fight. The man walks forward, throws bombs, and dares you to survive. And finally, Arman Tsarukyan, the #1 ranked contender, a wrestler with elite-level grappling, sharp boxing, and a gas tank that seems almost inhuman. When Topuria fights Gaethje, it is going to be one of the most anticipated lightweight title fights in years. Striker versus striker, power versus toughness, style clash of the highest order. But whoever wins, they're going to be looking up and seeing Arman Tsarukyan right there, having stayed ready, having stayed active, with a mandatory title shot and a ton of momentum behind him. Here's where it gets particularly interesting. Arman has an unfinished storyline with this entire division. Islam Makhachev, who held the lightweight belt before Topuria, was supposed to be his title fight in January 2025. It never happened. That's a fight that feels unresolved, and if Makhachev eventually comes into the picture, that rivalry has legs. But the more immediate story is Topuria. Topuria is a devastating striker. Arman is a monster wrestler who can mix in clean boxing. That is a legitimately great stylistic matchup. Arman can take the fight to the ground. He can use his wrestling to neutralize Topuria's power. It's not a case of hopefully Arman can survive the striking. He has the tools to genuinely give Topuria problems.
Gaethje, on the other hand, is a wrestler's nightmare in some ways because he sprawls and brawls brilliantly. But Arman's level of persistence on the mat is different from most challengers Gaethje has seen. Either way, Arman Tsarukyan versus whoever comes out of Topuria versus Gaethje is a fight that writes itself, and Arman hinted that there are even more options the UFC has laid out for him. He said, "There are a couple of different things that can happen. I cannot tell, but it should be good." Cryptic, but confident, and that confidence doesn't feel performed, it feels earned. The way Arman Tsarukyan is handling this period in his career is genuinely unusual. Most athletes in his position, talented, proven, waiting for the biggest moment of their career, tend to go into a kind of protective mode. They train hard behind closed doors. They don't risk anything publicly. They protect their record. They protect their reputation. Arman has done the exact opposite. He is competing constantly. He is calling people out loudly. He's showing up in different organizations, under different rule sets, against different opponents. And every time he shows up, he wins. At 29 years old, he is treating this moment not as a holding pattern, but as a growth period. Every wrestling match sharpens his grappling. Every grappling match sharpens his submissions. Every public interview builds his media presence and his fan base. The fighter who walks into that UFC title fight, whenever it comes, is going to be a more complete, more experienced, more dangerous version of Arman Tsarukyan than the one who was supposed to fight Islam Makhachev in January 2025. And you can trace that directly to his decision to stay active, stay hungry, and stay moving. There's an old saying in combat sports circles, styles make fights, but momentum makes champions. Arman is building momentum right now in a way that very few fighters at his level are willing to do. He's putting himself out there, he's accepting risk, and so far, every single risk is paid off. That is the big idea here. Not watch Arman fight, but this. The way he is managing his career right now is teaching us something about what it looks like when a truly elite competitor refuses to let circumstance define their timeline. Look, if you've made it this far, you already know Arman Tsarukyan is not your average wait-your-turn fighter. He is competing everywhere, winning everywhere, calling out everyone, and positioning himself so precisely that when that title shot finally lands, and it will, he's not going to be rusty, nervous, or unprepared. He's going to be ready, because he never stopped moving. And honestly, there's something to take from that, whether you follow MMA or not. The people who win the big moments are rarely the ones who sat still waiting for them. Now, if this video gave you something, do one thing for me. Hit subscribe.